5. Signs the power of the cross is working in your life. When we talk about the cross, most of us picture something beautiful, holy ground, a moment in history that changed everything. But here's the part many believers quietly wonder about. If the cross is the power of God, why don't I always feel that power in my daily life? That's an honest question, and it's one almost every Christian asks at some point. We read the message of the cross is the power of God. But power doesn't always show up like lightning or dramatic breakthroughs. More often, it shows up inside us, subtle, steady, real. Not loud, not forced, just quietly shifting things in a way we can't quite explain. Maybe you've noticed moments like that, without even realizing it. A weight you carried suddenly felt lighter. A fear that used to overwhelm you didn't hit as hard. A situation that once drained you now meets a calmer heart. Those moments matter. They're not coincidences. They're clues, little reminders that God is closer than you think. And the cross is already doing more in you than you've been giving yourself credit for. So today, instead of trying to figure out every reason behind your struggles, let's do something simpler. Let's look at the signs. The kind of signs that show up when the cross stops being a symbol you admire and becomes a power that's shaping your inner world. And there are 5 that are especially clear. Part 1. You feel God lifting burdens you can't explain. Sign number 1 that the power of the cross is working in your life is simple, but deep. You start to feel lighter on the inside, even when nothing has changed on the outside. The same bills, the same responsibilities, the same uncertainty about the future may still be there, but your heart is not carrying them the way it used to. The Bible gives us a beautiful promise in Psalm 55, verse 22. Cast your burdens on the Lord, and He will sustain you. That is not a poetic slogan. That is a description of what begins to happen when the cross becomes real in your inner life. Jesus does not always remove the storm immediately, but He starts by taking the weight off your chest so you can breathe again. Maybe you know this feeling. For a long time you lie awake at night, scrolling through every possible outcome in your mind, playing the worst scenarios over and over. Then one day, after a simple prayer that did not even sound very powerful, you realize you fell asleep faster. Your thoughts still notice the problem, but your heart is quieter. You are not ignoring reality, yet somehow you are not drowning in it anymore. Sometimes it shows up in very ordinary moments. You are driving to work, thinking about the same pressure you have been under for months. And instead of that familiar tightness in your chest, there is a deep sigh that feels almost like relief. You catch yourself humming a worship song without planning to. You still know the numbers, the deadlines, the medical terms, but they do not sit on your soul the same way. I have watched this happen in real people. A mother walks through a long season of sickness in her family. The reports are not improving. The numbers are not changing. On paper, nothing is better. But in one moment of worship, tears roll down her face, not because she is desperate, but because she suddenly knows deep inside, we are not alone in this. The symptoms have not moved yet, but the burden has. She walks out of that room with the same situation and a different weight on her shoulders. This is often how the cross works first, from the inside out. Before God changes what you see, He changes how you carry what you see. He gently reaches into places you cannot fix with willpower, and He lifts what you were never designed to hold by yourself. The inbox is still full. The diagnosis is still there. The future is still unclear. But your heart is no longer living under the same heavy sky. So let me ask you gently, have you noticed any small places where your soul feels lighter lately? Maybe you did not celebrate it, because the big miracle has not come yet. But those quiet shifts are not small to God. They are often the first sign that the power of the cross is already at work in you, lifting what you cannot explain, making room for peace where fear used to sit. Part 2. Old patterns begin to break quietly. Sign number 2 is something many believers overlook because it rarely arrives with fireworks or dramatic testimonies. It comes quietly. It comes gently. And yet, it is one of the clearest proofs that the power of the cross is moving inside you. The old patterns that used to control you begin to lose their grip. The cross does more than forgive your past. It breaks the chains that tried to follow you into your future. Jesus himself said in John chapter 8 verse 36, "Whom the Son sets free is free indeed." That means freedom is not a theory. It is not a motivational idea. It is a change in your inner world that shows up in the way you respond, the way you think, the way you choose. You may not even notice it at first. One day someone says something sharp, and instead of reacting the way you always did, you pause, you breathe, you choose grace. A situation that used to send you into a spiral does not pull you under this time. The temptation that once felt impossible to resist now feels quieter, not gone, not erased, but weaker, like its voice has lost authority over you. I have seen this so many times. A young man once told me he used to run to his phone every time he felt lonely or stressed, scrolling through hours of content that never truly helped him rest. He tried rules, he tried blocking apps, he tried making promises to himself, but nothing lasted. Then God began healing a deeper ache in his heart, the one that screen time could never satisfy. Slowly, without fanfare, the urge to escape started fading. One day he looked up and realized, almost shocked, that the old pattern was no longer driving him. The chain did not break in a dramatic moment. It dissolved in the presence of someone greater. Maybe for you it shows up in smaller ways. The impatience that once exploded now softens before it reaches your lips. The heaviness that used to grip your mornings begins to loosen its hold. The habit of replaying old fears in your mind is not as loud as it used to be. These shifts may feel subtle, but they are not insignificant. They are signs that the Spirit of God is healing something at the root, not just trimming the branches. Often we think freedom means we wake up one day completely transformed, but most of the time, the cross works like sunrise. The sky brightens one shade at a time, until suddenly you realize the light has taken over. The old patterns do not break because you try harder. They break because Christ is renewing the places in you that were once shaped by pain, fear, or self-protection. Let me ask you something softly, the way I would ask a friend over a quiet cup of coffee. Have you noticed anything in yourself that has been shifting? Maybe you do not react as sharply. Maybe you do not fall into the same cycle of discouragement. Maybe the things that once defined you no longer feel like your identity. If that is happening, even in tiny ways, please hear this. It is not your strength. It is the power of the cross, doing what only God can do, breaking chains you thought you had to live with, and freeing you from the inside out. Part 3. You stop respecting the problems that once intimidated you. Sign number 3 is subtle but powerful. The problems that used to overwhelm you no longer carry the same authority in your mind or your emotions. They may still be present, and they may still require wisdom, planning, and prayer, but they no longer feel like giants towering over your life. Something inside you has shifted. Something inside you knows, almost instinctively now, that what once intimidated you is no longer in charge. Jesus said in John chapter 16 verse 33, "Take heart, I have overcome the world." He did not tell us this so we could pretend challenges don't exist. He told us so we could face them without the fear that once swallowed us whole. When the cross is working in your life, your situation may look the same, but your posture is different. You stand a little taller, you breathe a little deeper. You stop giving problems a throne they were never meant to sit on. I once spoke with a man who had spent years living under the shadow of financial anxiety. Every bill, every unexpected expense, every downturn in the economy felt like a personal threat to his security. But after a season of drawing near to God, something remarkable changed. His income didn't suddenly double, and his circumstances didn't magically shift overnight, but his reactions did. He looked at the same numbers and felt a strange steadiness where panic used to live. He began saying things like, "This is challenging, but it's not final," or "God has carried me this far. He won't stop now." The problem didn't shrink. His confidence in God grew. You might recognize this in your own life. A doctor's report that once would have crushed your spirit now drives you to prayer rather than despair. A difficult relationship that previously drained your energy no longer dictates your peace. The thought of the future, which once filled you with dread, now stirs something closer to curiosity, maybe even hope. It's not that you are avoiding reality. You are just not bowing to it anymore. Sometimes the shift is so gentle, you barely notice it happening. You speak about challenges with less fear in your voice. You stop rehearsing worst-case scenarios in your mind. You no longer magnify the obstacle. You begin to magnify the one who walks with you through it. It's like your heart quietly learned a new language, one that recognizes problems but refuses to worship them. And maybe you've had moments like this too. You felt the weight of a situation rise up against you, and instead of collapsing, something in you said, "No, not this time." Not out of stubbornness, not out of pride, but out of a deep confidence that didn't come from you. A confidence that feels borrowed. A confidence that feels given. So let me talk to you the way I would to someone sitting across the table, stirring their coffee, unsure if they're growing or just imagining things. Have you noticed that certain fears don't grip you the way they used to? Have you caught yourself speaking with a strength that surprises even you? Those are not small things. They are the quiet evidence that the cross has taken up residence in your courage. When you stop respecting the problems that once intimidated you, it's not because life became easier. It's because your heart is learning who truly deserves your reverence, and it's no longer the problem. Part 4. You begin to love in ways you never could before. Sign number 4 shows up in one of the most personal places of all, the way you love. Not the way you try to love, not the way you think you should love, but the way love naturally begins to flow out of you in situations where before you felt empty or guarded. When the cross is working deeply in your life, your heart starts to soften in places where it used to tighten. You find yourself choosing patience where irritation once lived, offering compassion where resentment used to grow, and forgiving faster than you ever thought you could. God spoke a promise in Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 26. "I will take away your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh." That is not just a poetic prophecy. It is a picture of what grace does in a real human life. The cross does not simply remove guilt. It rewrites the emotional patterns that have shaped you for years. You begin to respond from a new heart, not from old wounds. I once listened to a woman share about her relationship with her father. For years, she carried the weight of misunderstandings, disappointments, and unspoken hurts. Every conversation with him felt heavy. Every attempt to reconcile felt forced. But as she walked through her own journey with God, something gentle began to change in her. She would hear his voice and no longer feel the same tightness in her chest. She noticed herself seeing him not through the lens of what he failed to give, but through compassion for what he never received. And one day, almost without realizing it, she hugged him with a sincerity she had not felt since childhood. No one told her to do it. No sermon forced the moment. The cross simply softened a place in her that had been hard for a long time. Maybe you have experienced it in smaller, everyday moments. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and instead of reacting, you shrug and let it go. A friend forgets something important, and you find yourself offering grace instead of keeping score. A family member speaks sharply, and your first instinct is not to win the argument, but to understand the pain behind their words. You might wonder where this new gentleness is coming from. It is coming from Jesus. It is his heart moving through yours. This kind of love does not mean you become passive or that boundaries disappear. It means the posture of your heart shifts from self-protection to compassion. You are less driven by old narratives and more anchored in the quiet strength that comes from God's kindness toward you. You stop needing to prove yourself right. You stop rehearsing offenses. You stop replaying old conversations in your mind. Instead, something inside you leans toward healing, toward peace, toward connection. Let me share this with you tenderly. When you begin loving in ways you know you could never produce on your own, that is not personality. That is not maturity. That is the cross reshaping your inner life. It is Christ loving through you, teaching your heart to move with a grace that doesn't come from effort, but from transformation. And maybe you have already noticed this without celebrating it. Maybe there is someone who once drained your patience, and now you find yourself praying for them with sincerity. Or someone who once felt impossible to forgive, and suddenly their name doesn't sting the way it used to. These are not coincidences. They are not small victories. They are the quiet, unmistakable signs that God has been touching your heart in places you didn't even know he was healing. Loving beyond your own capacity is one of the clearest confirmations that the cross is working deeply in you. It means your heart is learning a new rhythm, one shaped not by past pain, but by the one who carried all pain on your behalf. Part 5. You face impossible things with a strength that isn't yours. Sign number 5 is often the one people notice last, but when it appears, it is unmistakable. You begin to face situations that once felt impossible with a strength that surprises even you. Not a loud strength, not a dramatic strength, a steady, quiet, deeply rooted strength that feels borrowed from a source far greater than your own. The kind of strength that helps you keep standing when life gives you every reason to fall. Romans chapter 8, verse 11 says, "The same Spirit who raised Jesus from the dead lives in you." Most of us have heard that verse many times, but there comes a moment when it stops being something we recite and becomes something we actually experience. It shows up when you are walking through something you never asked for, something you don't fully understand, and yet you notice a calm determination carrying you from one day to the next. I've talked with people who have lived through seasons that would shake anyone. A parent caring for a sick child. A husband navigating months of uncertainty with his job. A young woman rebuilding her life after a painful chapter. And when they look back, they almost always say the same thing. I don't know how I made it through. I just knew I wasn't walking alone. They describe moments where fear should have conquered them but didn't. Moments where exhaustion should have broken them but somehow didn't. Not because they became stronger on their own, but because God was strengthening them in ways they couldn't see at the time. Maybe you felt something like that too. A conversation you dreaded, and yet you walked into it with unexpected peace. A decision you were afraid to make, and yet you felt guided step by step. A week that should have drained you completely, and yet somehow you found rhythms of grace woven into each day. It wasn't adrenaline. It wasn't denial. It was the Spirit of God beneath your feet, lifting you, steadying you, filling the cracks where your strength once leaked out. There is a quiet miracle in endurance. It doesn't always look like bold declarations or dramatic breakthroughs. Sometimes it looks like showing up again, praying again, hoping again, choosing not to quit, choosing not to run, choosing not to give in to voices that once felt louder than truth. These choices matter, and they are often the evidence that resurrection power is already alive inside you. I think of a man who walked through a year, filled with loss, layer after layer, one blow after another. People expected him to crumble. He expected himself to crumble. And yet, though his heart was tender, his faith held. He told me later, "I was weaker than I've ever been, but somehow I stood stronger than I've ever stood." That is the paradox of the cross. When you reach the end of your own strength, you begin to discover the strength that has always been Christ's. Let me say this gently, as if we were sitting somewhere quiet, reflecting together. Have you noticed any moments lately where you handled something better than you expected? Where courage rose in you at a time you normally would have withdrawn? Where hope flickered in a place that once felt heavy? These moments are not random. They are not signs of you finally getting it together. They are evidence of God carrying you in ways only He can. When you face the impossible with a strength that isn't yours, it is one of the clearest signs that the power of the cross is no longer just a belief you hold. It has become a life you live. One step, one breath, one quiet miracle at a time. Conclusion. The cross is still working even today. As we come to the end of this journey, I want you to take a moment and look back at these 5 signs with an honest, gentle heart. Not to measure yourself, but to notice where God may have already been moving in ways you didn't recognize. The cross often works quietly before it works visibly. It reshapes your inner world long before your circumstances catch up. Maybe you've felt a little lighter lately, even though nothing around you has changed. Maybe an old pattern has begun to loosen its grip. Maybe your fears don't speak as loudly as they once did. Maybe your heart is softening in places that surprised you. Maybe strength has been rising in moments where you expected to fall. These are not coincidences. These are the fingerprints of God. The power of the cross was never meant to stay on a page or remain a memory from long ago. It was meant to live in your daily life, shaping your reactions, lifting your burdens, deepening your love, and carrying you into a strength that could only come from Him. So as you step forward from here, don't rush past the quiet work God is already doing. Celebrate it, lean into it, let it grow. The cross is not finished with you. It is still forming you, still freeing you, still filling your life with a hope that does not break. And if even one of these signs is alive in you, then take heart. The power of the cross is already at work, and it's only the beginning.